Hello everyone and welcome to this video tutorial in which I'm going to be reminding you how to apply the law on negligence to a scenario, and we're also going to look at a model answer for a question from the 2019 exam 2 on negligence. I'd like to start by reminding you of what a big topic negligence is. So on this slide here, I've got the three elements of negligence that we need to prove in order to find a defendant liable: duty of care, breach of duty, and damage. And you can see here that we've got a lot of cases on each element of negligence. And that means that applying the law on negligence is quite challenging, because you've got a lot of law to explain and a lot of law to apply. So I'm going to start by reminding you of the idea structure that we use to answer a negligence scenario. On this slide then, I've got the idea structure, and I'm using the idea with the EAEA structure. So you're going to start off, as always, by identifying the issue. So your defendant, and pull out their name from the scenario. Lucy might be liable in negligence for the injury caused to Kate when she, whatever it happens to be that they've done that's negligent. You then define negligence. So negligence is where a person owes another person a duty of care, they breach it, and this results in damage. And then you're going to explain duty of care using cases. So if I just flick back to the slide we looked at a moment ago, you're going to explain Donahue and Stevenson and the Caparo test and all of those cases there. And at that point, once you've explained them, you're then going to apply duty of care to your scenario. So look at what's happened in your case and decide, is it reasonably foreseeable? What sort of proximity do you have? Do you have physical or legal, or maybe you've got both? And also look at, is your defendant a public body acting in an emergency? Probably not, but that's the third stage. So you've explained and applied duty of care. You then explain breach of duty. So to go back to the previous slide, breach, you're going to explain the standard is that of the reasonable man, and you're going to explain all your cases on this area. And then once you've explained that, you're going to apply it to your scenario. So look back at your characters and think about, do they have any special characteristics? Are they a child, a learner, or an expert? And then look at the risk factors and pick out as many that you can possibly make apply in your scenario. So you're going to say whether it was high or low risk, identify whether you had a vulnerable victim, etc. Apply it all to your scenario. So you've explained breach, you've applied breach, you've then got to explain damage. So skipping back to that last slide, you're going to explain all of the law on damage, your factual causation with cases, remoteness of damage with cases. I possibly wouldn't bother with res ipsa unless it applies in your scenario. The main bit is factual and remoteness of damage. And once you've explained all of those, you apply them back to your scenario. Is but for met? Is the injury reasonably foreseeable? Does thin skull apply? And then that should lead you hopefully to a nice conclusion. On this slide here, I've got a negligence scenario which was taken from the June 2019 exam paper. Now this particular scenario actually has two torts in it. It's got negligence in it and it's got vicarious liability in. For now, we are only going to look at the negligence aspect. So when you get a scenario like this in the exam, you need to go through and highlight any issues that immediately jump out at you as being relevant to negligence. So I'm going to do that with you now, and then we're going to look at an actual model answer on this. We're going to read through it line by line and identify anything that's going to be useful to us. So Eric works for Sweets R Us, a small company which makes sweets. Eric works in the manufacturing area and he has to wear protective clothing and headgear. One of Eric's jobs is to add boiling hot sugar to the sweet mix. As the boiling hot sugar is at an extremely high temperature, in order to protect his skin, Eric has to wear special insulated gloves provided by the company. Now at this point, I'm going to get my highlighter and I'm going to highlight this extremely high temperature. And I think that's going to come in relevant to the issue of negligence. This is telling me that something is high risk here. It looks a bit dangerous, and it's so dangerous he's got specialist equipment. So if we carry on reading, the gloves are made from a special non-slip material. In July 2017, Eric was carrying some boiling hot sugar across the factory floor. He lost his special gloves and was wearing a pair of ordinary woolen gloves. So again, I'm going to get my highlighter here and I'm going to want to highlight this. So he's lost his special gloves and he's wearing ordinary woolen gloves. So that to me looks a bit negligent. If he's got special gloves and he's now wearing ordinary woolen ones, that doesn't look great. These gloves didn't have any non-slip material, and when the container of boiling hot sugar began to slip from Eric's hands, he nearly dropped it. As a result, some boiling hot sugar spilled onto Eric's arms and burned it badly. Gary was a colleague working nearby. Sounds relevant to me. Sounds like a proximity issue. Some of the boiling hot sugar also splashed onto Gary's lips, causing a burn. So there we go, we've got some damage. Unfortunately, due to an existing predisposition to cancer, the burn turned cancerous. So I'm going to highlight this as well. Hopefully you spotted that if he's got this existing predisposition, that looks like thin skull, Smith and Leach brain. And then you're being asked to advise Gary of any legal action he may be able to take. So we're just looking at negligence today, and we've identified some key issues there. And now that we've highlighted these key issues, I always think before you start writing, it's a good idea to go through a checklist, even if it's just your mental checklist. So thinking about that scenario with Eric, is it reasonably foreseeable that if you carry boiling hot sugar across a factory floor with just woolly gloves instead of non-slip gloves on, someone might be injured? Yes. Was there proximity? Yeah, he was nearby. Is it fair, just and reasonable? Yes, because he's not a public body acting in an emergency. So we've got duty, check. Have we got any special characteristics? Well, we don't have a child or a learner. I mean, Eric might argue he's new to the job, he's a learner, but he's going to have to meet the same standard as an experienced person, nettleship. In terms of risk factors, I would say carrying the boiling hot sugar is high risk. He's not taken any precautions. We don't have a vulnerable victim that Eric was aware of. But it seems like we've got a breach of duty because a reasonable person wouldn't have just worn the woolly gloves. And the last bit, damage. Would it have happened but for Eric wearing his woolly gloves? No, of course it wouldn't have happened. Is it remote? He's going to argue that he couldn't foresee the cancerous burn, but thin skull, take your victim as you find them. I think it is reasonably foreseeable. It's the type of harm you would expect, etc. So I've gone through my mental checklist before I start writing an answer. Switch screens here to show you a model answer on the Eric scenario. So we've already read and highlighted the scenario, so we can scroll past that. And you can see here what I've done is I've written an answer to the scenario. And wherever I've done application, it's in red font. And wherever I'm doing A01, it's in black font. And I've highlighted the cases for you as well. And I just want to scroll down it and back up And hopefully you can see just from the colours that in my answer there's a nice balance of red, black throughout. And you can see that I've got a significant number of cases there as well. So this is going to be a nice high scoring answer because there's a nice balance between AO2 application, AO1 knowledge. And just to point out how I've explained it then, how I've answered it, I've started off with Gary may be able to take action against Eric for negligence when he splashes him with boiling sugar. I've defined negligence. It's where someone owes a duty, they've breached it, and it results in damage. And then I've explained duty of care. So I've got Donahue, Caparo. I've then explained the Caparo test. You've got reasonably foreseeable here. And then I've applied it and I've said it's reasonably foreseeable that Eric carrying boiling hot sugar with the wrong gloves would cause harm. I've explained proximity with some cases and I've applied it back and said there's physical proximity because they're working nearby. I've explained fair, just and reasonable. I've explained it back. He's not a public body. And then on to breach. So I explain breach of duty, the special characteristics here. And I've said that there's not really any special characteristics in the scenario. Eric might try and say he's new to the job, he's a learner, but if we apply nettleship, that won't help him anyway. And I can say that a reasonable man would wear the correct non-slip gloves, so he's breached his duty. And then I've explained my risk factors, and I've explained and applied as I've gone. So I've talked about low risk and high risk, and I've picked which one it is. So in this scenario, it's more likely to be a high risk. I've then explained vulnerable victim, and I've just pointed out that we didn't know Gary was vulnerable at the time, but it's still a high risk situation. I've then explained precautions and said that Eric hasn't taken any precautions. And it's good practice here to say what he could have done. So he could have told his employers he needed new gloves. So it looks like he's breached his duty there. And then I've gone to explain damage. So I'm explaining factual causation here and multiple causes, and I'm applying it back. So Gary would not have been burned but for Eric slipping with the hot sugar. So we've got factual. There's no multiple causes, no new intervening acts. So we've got factual. I've then gone on to explain remoteness of damage with my cases. And then I've applied it back. And the only really relevant thing here is to say that he's got to take his victim as he finds him, Smith and Leach brain. And then my conclusion, Gary's able to claim for negligence against Eric because we've shown Eric owes him a duty, he's breached it, and it's resulted in damage. So hopefully just through me going very, very quickly, obviously, through this answer, you can see what I've done, explaining, applying all the elements of negligence as I've gone along. That's the usual mark bands that we're used to here. So if you follow this plan and explain and apply as you go along, hopefully you should be in band 4 here, because you'll have shown excellent knowledge, your black AO1, and you'll have shown excellent application, your red AO2. So I hope this video tutorial has been useful in reminding you the steps in applying the law on negligence, and also just helping you to see how your answer should look if you follow that plan.